Do you know someone amazing? Someone who has a unique job or hobby? Maybe someone involved with an interesting organization, be it a creative community or a charitable mission. There are people like this hidden in our community, living their daily lives all the while achieving incredible goals, creating works of art, inspiring others to be their best, or just generously donating their time. This show is about putting a spotlight on these members of our community. I'm Ben Harris, a 2017 graduate of Shrewsbury High School and alumnus of the SHS Speech and Debate Team, here to introduce a new show that will be hosted by different members of the current team each episode, showcasing their talents as they work to deliver these enriching community stories to you as we celebrate these quiet but undoubtedly impressive individuals. Simply put, we want you to stay with us for a moment, because these are the people you have to meet.
Hi, and welcome to You Have to Meet. Today we're here with Tom Flynn, a Shrewsbury native and an SHS alumnus. He's also a beekeeper and is here to educate us about the various use of bees. So Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you, Neelasha. I got into beekeeping about 5 years ago. A few of my customers have bees. I'm a plumber in town. A few of my customers have bees. I have some neighbors that also keep bees. It's something I think I always wanted to get into, but 5 years ago I took the jump and I went to a class at UMass. It was thrown by the Worcester Beekeepers Association, which happens to be the oldest beekeeping association in the country. And it was an 8-week class. It was very affordable. I think it was $30 at the time, and the information you get from the class is just, it's I want to say it's not overwhelming, but you just get a wealth of information, and you learn so much about the bees that you would have no idea, what they do and how remarkable they are.
Right. So what was it at first that compelled you to beekeeping in particular? Like, what was it about?
I'm not sure. It might have been something like watching it on TV. It's just something, you always know about beekeepers and they're there, but growing up, I've never seen a beekeeper, or I never even saw a real hive. I don't even know if I really knew the difference between bees and wasps and, back then when I was a kid. But I think it's just, and finding out when they were in trouble, when honeybees are in, I don't know if they're technically endangered, but their numbers are decreasing, and it's a serious thing that people have to be aware of. So that, I'm sure, was part of why I wanted to become a beekeeper. I think if everyone became a beekeeper, it sounds crazy, but at one time a lot of people were beekeepers. Honey was one of the only sweeteners. We need, if society as a whole would benefit from more people keeping bees, and bees would benefit.
Right.
Another thing is, with the class, you realize, you know the difference between wasps and bees. And bees, when they sting, they can only sting once and then they die. Honeybees really don't want to sting you. They'll bump you, they'll try to push you back a little bit. Stinging is a last resort, whereas a wasp, they can sting you many times. They don't die if they sting, and it really doesn't matter to them. They could care less if they sting you or not. Bees are a little bit different. Their temperament is much, much better than that of a wasp or a hornet. They just don't, there are different types of honeybees. There are Italian bees, which probably 90% of it was what most beekeepers have. They're very calm. They have as far as personality, they're friendly bees.
Right.
Then you have your Russian bees, which are more aggressive than your Italian, but they're still a honeybee. They have they tend to maybe hive a little bit smaller, but they are more aggressive. I've had experience with both Italian and Russian, and I would much rather deal with the Italian bees than the Russian ones.
Right.
They're just tough. And then, of course, there's Africanized bees, which aren't a threat in New England, but down south, they're moving in different societies, and they're not a bee that you want to mess around with. They do have the potential of killing humans and animals. And then there is a bee. It is a Carolinian, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, and that's kind of, I believe, a hybrid honeybee, which is also supposed to be a very well-tempered, friendly bee that is becoming, I think, more popular around here.
Right. And what advice would you give to someone who wants to take up beekeeping?
First thing I would say is go to school. When I went to, when a buddy of mine told me he signed me up for bee school, we called it, I thought I would be going into a room with about a dozen farmers. Well, the class at the time was at UMass, and I walked into a room that had about 300 people in it from every walk of life: doctors, farmers, plumbers, everyone was there. And it was such an interesting class. And they go over right from top to bottom. I mean, it was a class that I was excited to go to every week. And you become a member of the Beekeepers Association for that year. That's part of the fee. And I think now they may have it at Grafton High School. But that is definitely the most important part of beekeeping, being, knowing a little bit about the bees before you go into it. They're remarkable little creatures, and there's a lot to know, but it's not overwhelming either. It's all in all, the bees do most of the work. You just kind of have to watch over them a little bit.
Right. And do you think if more people were educated about how friendly and helpful these bees are, do you think that negative stigma around them would
not only the negative stigma as far as bees are concerned and stinging, but also when you learn about the honeybee and how much different it is than the wasps and the hornets, you want to care for them more. And when you find out how much in trouble they are, you want to watch out for them. And I think if more people became beekeepers, not only would the population of bees go up, but the awareness of pesticides or herbicides and all the things that that can damage a bee and hurt a bee. And once you realize how much that we need the bees, that's really the most important thing. I mean, honeybees are by far the biggest pollinators on Earth. They, unlike, say, a bumblebee, bumblebees will make some honey, but mostly just what they need. Honeybees will make enough honey for what they need, plus 30, 40 pounds more, or even more than that,
right.
Depending on how big the hive is or how healthy it is.
And could you just elaborate a little bit more on the other uses of the bee, specifically homeopathically?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When I got my first hive, I was, the man who gave it to me is a very, very smart man when it comes to bees. He'd been keeping bees since he was about 12. But he told me if I got stung enough, I would never get arthritis. I talked to him a little bit about it, and then I went home and I looked more into it. And online, looking at it, it's true. Beekeepers, and I mean people who do 8 hours a day and real beekeepers, they don't get many diseases, and arthritis is something that they don't get.
Right.
And reading more, in fact, I have a little. There is a book out there. It's called "Bees Don't Get Arthritis." It's written by Fred Malone, and basically what he did was he had a van. I believe the book was written in the 70s, and he really went across country visiting all different beekeepers and just interested in their health, and finding out that beekeepers are really one of the healthiest people, occupation, careers there is.
Right.
And that's a very good book. It just tells how, getting stung by bees enough helps prevent and helps the pain of arthritis.
Right.
The other book I would like to tell people to look at is, it's called The Bible of Bee Venom. And that was written by a man, a medical doctor, by Bodog Beck, back probably in the 20s. And I believe he's from Austria, or somewhere from Europe. And he brought the whole bee apitherapy thing over. He had a hive right in his office, and he used the bees almost as a last resort. He would sting patients for almost anything and had great luck with it. And the last book I would like to talk about is a book called How Well Are You Willing to Be? And that is BEE by Pat Wagner. And Pat Wagner was a woman who in 1970 was diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis. And she went through the whole 20-year process of conventional medicine. And she was, at that point, in around 92, bedridden.
Right.
Had lost a lot of her sight. She had lost a lot of her hearing. Just the doctors had told her that the disease had taken its course, and there wasn't much they could do for her. In her book, she said it was about a month after that, her mother finally convinced her to let someone come over and sting her with a bee. And that was a turning point in her life. It changed her life. And she continued with that therapy. And she ended up getting, being able to walk, I believe with the aid of a walker, but getting a lot of her sight back, getting a lot of her hearing back. But most of all, I mean, she was up and out of bed. And at that point, she decided that she was going to treat anyone and everyone she could with bee venom. And at that point, her house was full of people constantly. And anyone that has MS or maybe a disease similar to that, get that book. It's a life changer, and if you're really serious about it, look into the bee venom therapy. It will change their lives, I think, for the most part. I personally have treated someone with MS. I used her techniques in the book. I followed her directions, and he has he's experiencing some major, I don't want to say breakthroughs, but he is feeling much, much better. And using parts of his body again that he hasn't used in a long time. He wasn't at her stage when he started this, but his walking has gotten much, much better. He's using and reaching out. His right side was affected by the MS. And he's using, he says now that he's been doing it for 3 or 4 months now. It's more of subtle things he's realizing almost constantly that he's getting back.
Right, which is amazing.
It's amazing, and he's now doing it himself. And he's got his own bees. He knows how to do it now, and he's treating himself. It's not a cure, but it is definitely a beneficiary to anyone that has that disease.
Absolutely. And what about the hive? What are the uses for
the hive? Well, there's all kinds of uses for the other. Of course, most famous is honey. Honey can be, it's not just eating. Honey is excellent for burns. Honey, there's different kinds of honey. It's just, honey is a big, big market. Other than that is the wax. Beeswax is a big market. I heard that the wax recently is now a larger market than maybe the honey. So there's a big, big demand for beeswax. Propolis. Propolis is, I'll show you.
Okay.
Here's a large box. Now the hive is usually consists of 2 of these boxes on top of a bottom board, it's called.
Right.
And propolis is all this little brown stuff around the hive.
Oh, okay.
It's like caulking. The bees make it, and they glue all the seams. Everywhere where they would see air or space, they'll seal it up. And this is a frame. Now there's 10 of these that fit into that box. This is the size that you leave for the bees. So the queen generally will start laying eggs in kind of like a rainbow shape.
Right.
And this will be all what's called brood. And in the corners and around the top, they usually store the honey in there, okay? And they'll do that on all 10 frames. And then they'll move up to another box, which is another large box, just like this, which has another 10 frames inside of it. And that queen will go back and forth from top to bottom, laying when she's done laying on the bottom board, she'll go up to the top and go back and forth. Now, these are the honey supers. It's just like the other box, but it's a little smaller. And these are the frames that go in that honey box, honey super. Now this is what the beekeepers will harvest. These. They make them small because when that honey box is full, it's heavy. When that's full of honey, that can be 40, 50 pounds.
Wow.
And sometimes you're picking it up from up here, so they make the honey supers a little bit lighter, a little smaller. Not to say that you couldn't put a large box on top of that. A lot of people will put 3 large boxes when the hives are starting to get really busy and really full and are starting to get crowded. What they'll do is the workers will build what's called a queen cell, and they'll make another queen. And what happens is when that queen hatches, the old queen will leave the hive, and she'll take half of the population with her.
Oh, okay.
And so that makes room. But the only problem with that is, as far as beekeepers are concerned, is that they never make just one. They'll make 2 or 3 queens. And if you don't go in your hive every 10 days or so, a queen can be from egg to queen in 16 days. So 3 or 4 queens could hatch in that time that you don't go in. And every time a queen leaves, she takes half the hive with her. So you can have a big, beautiful hive of 80,000 bees, in a matter of a couple of weeks, be almost down to nothing. If you don't check it, and if you let those queens hatch and do what they normally do.
So it's very important to keep checking up on it.
It's important to keep some people get bees and they just let nature take its course, and that's okay too. Many people say if you ask 10 beekeepers, one question, you'll get 10 different answers.
Right. Right.
I've also heard if God kept bees, they would still do whatever they wanted to do. The bees are going to do whatever they want to do. And, but you can watch, you can manipulate them to do certain things, hopefully.
Right.
But
they mostly do their
own
thing.
They do their own thing.
So Tom has actually also written a book, which his children Ashley and Joey helped illustrate. Ashley, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the book?
It's about a bee named Bonnie and a dragonfly named Brian. And Bonnie meets him after being swept away by wind, and they go on a city adventure.
And I actually heard that we have a little teaser on the book.
Hello, my name is Bonnie. I'm a honeybee. I live in the country in what is called a hive. Our beekeeper placed our hive in a beautiful meadow filled with almost every kind of wildflower imaginable. My sisters and I spend all day, every day, gathering pollen and nectar from all of those wildflowers. Then we bring it back to our hive and make the most delicious honey anyone has ever tasted. It's a lot of work and the days are very long, but I love it and I wouldn't ever change a thing. One day, however, was different, very different. It was a little scary, but mostly it was full of fun and excitement. In fact, it was the best day of my life. I have an idea. Sit back, relax, and I'll tell you all about it.
Wow, that was pretty cool. So what was the experience for you guys with illustrating the book?
It was definitely a little challenging since we were both younger, but like otherwise it was really fun and it was cool to be able to have an actual book.
Right. And I heard that your teachers even asked to keep autographed copies, you know. That's pretty cool. How'd you guys feel about that?
Like at the time we felt really special because like we were the only kids in the class with books. Like our dad wrote a book.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And has your opinion about bees changed ever since your dad took up beekeeping? Like, did you used to be scared of them and now you're kind of more accepting, or?
Well, to be honest, I was actually not really wanting bees at first because I didn't want to get attacked or stung or anything. But now that we've had them, it's been really great.
Right.
And I'm not afraid of them anymore.
And what about you, Joey?
Kind of the same. I thought they would sting me all the time, but they actually are nice and.
You don't even know they're there.
Right, right. And what about you? How was your experience with the book?
My experience with the book was great. It was funny. Again, the bees, I got the bees, and then I never thought about writing a book before, and the whole idea came to me, and it's only about a 20-page book, but it took me about 3 years to.
Oh, yeah.
3 years, on and off. You get an idea, you write a couple of pages, and anyone who wrote a book knows what I'm talking about. It takes a little bit of time, but just thankful that it was completed. I have to thank my friend and my neighbor, Jim. He's a computer whiz, and he really stepped up and helped us with getting it self-published and the whole putting the book together part of it. He really did a great job with.
Mm-hmm. So what made you think oh, I want to write a book about? Well,
I think it just kind of came to me. I don't know when it was. I want to say maybe I was watching TV, and the idea of just, with these guys,
right.
just kind of popped in my head. It would be a cool thing to do, write a little story about a bee,
mm-hmm.
and a nice experience for these guys. In a way, it's, they can grow up and show their kids.
Right. It's a little learning experience that, you can have forever. Yeah.
So.
And do you think that by reading this book, some people will maybe change their minds about bees too?
I think so. It's a nice book. It'd be a teacher or a parent would read their kids before bed or anything like that. And it's the experience that I know is that all the kids, the feedback I get from the book is that all the kids love it.
Right.
And I think that's important by getting kids No, not that the book is really educational, it's really just a story, but it's getting kids to like bees,
Right.
you know, at an early age instead of fearing them, you know, and knowing that, you know, little personality in the bee is, you know, is a nice thing.
Well, humanizing
Yeah.
maybe for the bees.
Right.
Yeah. And Ashley and Joey, have any of your friends maybe like read the book and then maybe changed their mind?
I know that my neighbor actually didn't really like bugs, but she's like comfortable with coming over with the bees there. She doesn't really care.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, they read it, but I don't know how they felt like before about bees, and
But now they're definitely on the
I
positive
think
side.
that probably, definitely think that bees are probably a little bit nicer now anyhow.
This has been Neelasha Bhattacharjee from You Have to Meet. Do you have anyone else we need to meet? Well, if so, the email for this show will be on the screen, and let us know. Thank you for tuning in.